Well, hello. We're back.
Amen.
The last time we told basically Daddy's life story in a compressed form and tried to kind of give you the testimony of his life and all that. And we told a couple of little funny stories while we were doing that, but we wanted to dedicate a whole quote show
Amen.
to just nothing but funny stuff. And those of y'all that have traveled a long time that might be watching this, you know that you could just go on and on and on, you know. But we wrote down a few stories that we'd like to share with you. And you know, at this time particularly, we need to just laugh. There's a lot of
I like laughing.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of just constant negative news all the time on TV and radio, internet, and all that. And we just need to step aside and laugh about some things, get our mind off of what's going on right now.
Amen.
And this summer marks 46 years that we started 46 years ago full time, the summer of 1974.
Yep.
And so when you travel that many years, you're going to have some crazy and funny things to happen over the years. So
Amen.
so we want to laugh about those things. So I'm going to get kicked off, I think, about telling a story about we were singing in Bradford, Arkansas in about 1985, probably somewhere around there. And Jerry was on the piano, and we were singing Mama's song called John Saw a City. And we were just singing away, everything was going good, and all of a sudden Jerry just stopped playing the piano. And, you know, we all looked over at him and said, "What's going on?" He said, "Just go on, just go on." And Daddy said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Just go on, just go on." So we kept singing, and we finished the service and had invitation, all that, ended it. And finally Daddy said, "Now what in the world, why did you stop in the middle of that song?" He said, "Well, Daddy," he said, "I've been having sinus problems really bad." And he said, while I was playing, this piece of snot started coming down out of my nose. And he said, it was stringing out. And he said, first thing I tried was to shake it off, you know. And then he said, that didn't work. So he said, I was playing the piano, and I tried to get it while I was playing, you know, and keep one hand moving and try to get it off. And he said, he said, I just couldn't do it. So he said, finally, I just had to stop and get it off. So you can understand why he didn't want to tell that to the whole crowd at that time, because it may have ruined the service from that point on.
Embarrassed him if we
So that was a good one right there. Back when we first moved back to Louisiana, we moved back here in February of 1983. We moved from Memphis back to Alexandria, Louisiana. And well, we got a friend here locally named Troy Stuckey.
Amen.
And he, at that time, was building houses left and right, and a lot of construction projects going on. And he had a pickup truck that he ran around in, and you know, we were with him visiting on a site, a construction site. And so we got to talking and everything, and so Troy said, "Well, I'm going back to my house." I hope I tell this right, Troy, because you're probably going to correct me if I mess it up. So Troy said, "I'm going back to my house," and said, "Tommy, you ride with me." He said, "I'll let the boys take the pickup truck."
Yeah.
And said they can come on in a few minutes. So Daddy and Brother Troy, they took off in Daddy's car. So Jerry and I, we got into the pickup truck, Troy's pickup truck, and started out. And we didn't know how to get back to. They ran off real quick, and we didn't know how to get there. And so we were just feeling our way, trying to get back to Troy Stuckey's house. And all of a sudden, the horn on the pickup started honking, and we both just did, what in the world's going on, you know? And I told Jerry was driving, I said, Jerry, what are you doing? Quit honking the horn. He said, I'm not doing anything. He said, I'm not doing anything. Well, one time I had ridden in a Lincoln Continental that it was rigged up where if you squeeze the steering wheel, it would honk the horn. So I told Jerry, I said, stop squeezing the steering wheel. And Jerry was driving like this, you know. and so it honked again. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm not doing anything. So we stopped at a stoplight on the way to the house, trying to find it. And I mean, that horn just honk, 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 you know, like that. And people looking at us and giving us bad signs and everything else, you know. And there was nothing we could do. We didn't know what was going on. And so it took us a long time to get to Brother Troy's house. And we were just nervous wrecks by the time we had offended so many people by the time we got there. And Troy, when we pulled up the driveway, Troy said, why didn't y'all answer the phone? And there was a phone on the floor in that truck. Now you got to remember, this is about 1983, and back then there were very few vehicles that had telephones in them. There were no cell phones and very few mobile phones. So, but he had one in there, and he kept trying to call us to tell us how to get to the house, and we wouldn't answer the phone because we thought there was something wrong with the truck, you know. But anyway, we finally got to the house, you know.
He really enjoyed that.
I'm telling you. Now I'm gonna let Daddy tell you some stories. He was in a lot of meetings in the '70s with Dr. Carl Hatch. At that time, Dr. Hatch was based out of McKinney, Texas. But anyway, he was in a lot of meetings with him, and he was a really unique individual, to say the least.
Very.
And so, tell us about some of the things that happened when you were with him.
Well, I remember we were in a meeting over in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and there was a revival. He was preaching and I was singing, and we ate a bite at the motel, and then he said, let's go into our rooms. We need to get cleaned up before the service starts. And anyway, we started walking down the hall, and he said, Tommy, I need to jump in the restroom here just a minute. And I said, okay, me too. So we went in the restroom, and there was two fellas in there, and boy, one of them, I mean, when he saw us come in, well, when we went in the door, Brother Hatch did this quite often with other people, and they could tell you, many people could tell you. He said, now, Tommy, you tell me about that being saved thing again. I don't know if I can buy that now. Explain it again. Well, I knew what he was talking about. He wanted me to give the plan of salvation in front of these guys in the restroom. So I started. Well, man, one of them, I mean, he shot out there between us, zoom, he was gone. But the other guy hadn't finished, and so he started to go out. And he got right between us, and old Brother Hatch stopped him and said, sir, said, I want to ask you a question. Do you really believe what he's pointing to me? Do you believe what he's telling me about that salvation bit? This old boy, we didn't know it, but he was hiring a kite. He said, I don't know, but once you're saved, you're always saved. And he went out the door. Brother Hatch got so tickled, he fell back against the wall and slid down the wall laughing. Oh, man, that was funny. But then another time, if you want me to go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another time, Dr. Hatch and I were in a meeting up in the Dayton, Cincinnati area. And Dr. Rollins, we were friends with him, but Brother Hatch was a closer friend than me. Brother Hatch had even been on the staff with Dr. John Rollins up there in prior years. And so he said, he was on the phone. He said, Dr. Rollins wants us to come over and eat with him. It was a New Year's meeting, and he wants us to eat lunch with him, dinner with him at this home. And so I said, great, enjoy the fellowship. So we drove, And Brother Hatch said, you know, he said, I think I know that house. I know I'll know it when I get there and see it, which was, I think, probably about 25 miles away. But we pulled up. He said, oh, this is it right here. And he whipped in, and I said, Dr. Hatch, are you sure that's how? Yeah, this is it. This is it. And so he said, let's have some fun. So we went right up to the porch, went over to the door, and Dr. Hatch, pam, pam, pam on the door. And I mean, he hit it hard too. And he just grabbed the door and swung the thing open and said, hey, we come to be with you. And man, two big Doberman pinchers come out. Oh man, I tell you, I like to fade it. He did too. I mean, you're talking about get out of that house. And some guy come run the door and he said, what do you think you are bursting in my house like that? Oh, Brother Hatch, sorry about that. We're gone.
Yeah, went to the wrong house. Oh my goodness. What about that guy, the special ed guy that that when Brother Hatch would come?
Oh, yeah. He loved it when Brother Hatch came to preach. Brother Hatch would go back each year and preach a meeting. He'd come up to Brother Hatch, and he was a little slow, but he was faithful. And he said, you know, Brother Hatch, he said, you know what I like about you? Every time you come, I get saved.
Well, and then that story about at Dr. Gerald Fleming's church in Dayton, Dayton Baptist Temple.
Yeah. We each year he'd have Dr. Hatch and have me at that New Year's time. And but anyway, you'd have to know Dr. Hatch, and a lot of you watching this probably do know him. He's gone to be with the Lord now. But he was unusual. And I was sitting on the platform. Dr. Gerald Fleming, we were his church. And he was sitting over on the other side on the platform. And he would make a point, and he'd come over and shake hands with Dr. Fleming. Well, Dr. Fleming would reach out. And man, he'd jerk Dr. Fleming up out of that seat. And, everybody'd roar, And then he was preaching up a storm, and he come over toward me. And I knew that he was going to be doing that to me too. And I had reached around behind. It had a banister back there. And I locked my hand around that thing, my arm around that thing more tightly. And he came over and he made one of them points, reached down, got my hand, and I mean, he jerked back and it took him off his feet. that place roared. You'd have to know Dr. Hatch. He would always set his albums, but this is back when you had the big 33 RPM albums, and he'd stack them right next to the pulpit. And every time when he was preaching, he'd kick those things.
Oh man, he was something else.
He'd kick them out. Everybody get tickled. But that's just
anyway. He was a very unique individual. I tell you that. This is we're going to skip around on these time. Then that was back in the 70s. We're going to shoot way up into the 2000s.
Yeah.
I myself was singing the folk. I love the folks at Macedonia Baptist Church in Mesquite, Texas. And I sing there. Been singing there a long time and sing there once a year, and they have a prophet's chamber in the church building. And well, anyway, I was singing there on a Sunday night, and I was going to spend the night in that prophet's chamber, and then I was going to leave out the next morning and go home. And I thought after church, I said, well, I'm going to go ahead. Everybody had left. Everybody had went home. I was there in the building by myself. I said, I'm going to go ahead and get all my sound equipment all loaded up and ready to go. So when I wake up in the morning, I just hit the road and go home. So everybody left, and I had put all my equipment in the foyer, in the lobby area, and I was wrapping cords, and I was packing it up and all that. And well, their lobby, there's glass doors on one end, glass doors on the other end. And I was standing amongst all this equipment, and all of a sudden a car came screeching up and shone the lights through the glass doors right on me. And it was a cop car. And I just froze, you know, and here I was surrounded by sound equipment about 10 o'clock at night in a church building, and I thought he's going to think instantly that I'm trying to steal all this equipment. So I just froze, and he wasn't there 5 seconds until he threw it in reverse, and he peeled out and went around to the other side of the building across to the next parking lot, and there was another cop over there, and they met up, and both of them jumped out of their cars and began running around a church building that was in the next parking lot. And here I am, I'm witnessing all of this going on, you know. And the first thing I thought of is, I ain't spending the night here tonight. Because there's somebody loose around in this immediate vicinity, and they're looking everywhere desperately for this guy, and I am out of here, you know. So I mean, within 15 minutes, I was gone. I was out of that building. I would not have gotten any sleep that night. If I had stayed in that building, I would have not gotten any sleep, I guarantee you.
Tell them about the one where we was up there in Ohio, and we had to get into the church. And
oh, yeah. Well, I think I know what you're talking about. That was at Huber Heights Baptist Church in Dayton.
Yeah.
It's probably not, well, it was in Huber Heights. That's where it was at.
Yeah, Huber Heights.
But anyway, we got there about 45 minutes before the service started, and there wasn't a soul there. And we had, at that time, we had a lot of sound equipment. It took us quite a while to set up. And so, the service was going to start in 45 minutes, and we had to be set up, and we called the pastor's home, and we couldn't get any answer. No cell phones back then. So I told Daddy, I said, well, I'm going to get in this church building. So I got into a lot of church buildings back then. And so I had a knife. We got a knife. We was in that bus. I got a kitchen knife. And I worked around until I opened one of the doors of that church. And the alarm went off, and all over the neighborhood. Well, we just started loading our stuff in the church and just started setting up. That thing's blaring the whole time. Nobody ever showed up. No, I mean, I'm talking about police.
No police.
Police never showed up. And about 20 minutes before the service started, people started showing up for the service, and they cut it off. But I thought, what good is an alarm system if not a single soul comes to check out what's going on, you know? But anyway, we had a good service there, and you know.
Well, one time you broke in. We got the same thing. We got to the church, nobody was there, and this was a good pastor friend of ours.
That was Brother Tommy
Oglesby.
That's it.
Yeah. Go ahead, tell it.
Well, there was Brother Tommy Oglesby. Same thing. It took us a long time to set up. We got there early, couldn't get in, couldn't reach Brother Tommy Oglesby, and it just had no way of getting in. And so I told Dad, I said, I'm going to get in this church, you know. And so they had two doors on the side of the building. They weren't glass. They were wooden. And we took a screwdriver and a hammer and took all the hinges off the doors, pulled both the doors off, and loaded our equipment in, and then put the doors back on. Punctuality. This is your number one punctuality man right here. He's going to be on time. If he has to break the law, he's going to be on time.
No. That Tommy Oglesby is a very dear, close friend. He wouldn't have called the law on us.
But can you tell that story about years ago in Houston when we was in that camp meeting in 1977? 43 years ago, we was at that camp meeting.
You're talking about that first camp meeting we went to?
The first time we went to that church, and the preacher preached 2.5 hours.
Yeah, can
you remember that?
You insert something. Stop me if I mess up. But good camp meeting. I mean, just good preaching and everything. But then this one fella got up there, and like Shawn already said, and Shawn was about 9, wasn't you? 9 years.
9 years old.
9 years old, and You know, he always was well behaved in church. I never had any problem. But boy, I'm telling you, this preacher had preached 2.5 hours. He had already preached 2.5 hours, and I was wanting out there myself. Well, the pastor was sitting up on the platform, and about 2.5 hours with this preacher turned around and said, Pastor, I know that I've taken quite a bit of time. I have something else I really want to go into. And the pastor said, well, brother, you have preached 2.5 hours. And it didn't even make any difference.
He kept on going.
He just turned right around and kept on going. I mean, preaching. I think everybody was wishing, hey, this message, we got somebody else to preach. Well, and one big guy, he was a preacher, big man. He stood up and he started shouting while this guy was preaching. And the preacher that had preached 2.5 hours, he could not preach loud enough to be heard.
Yeah, the old guy had lungs.
Powerful lungs. And he just shouted that preacher down. And that preacher said, hey, I see you got the floor. And so he just got his coat. He had it off. He got his coat and stepped down. And that big preacher got up there, and he just said a very few words and dismissed us. And the next day he came to me and he said, I want to apologize for what I did last night. And I said, what? He said, well, I got up there and he said, I shut that preacher down like that. I said, thank God.
Well, you left some things out that were, for one thing, the preacher that was preaching, he preached against John R. Rice. He preached against Jack Hiles. He preached against the use of hairspray. And I don't remember what else. I mean, it was really, really wild and radical.
And he stepped out on the communion table and knocked one of the offering plates off and broke it.
Yeah. So it one of the wildest services that we have been in.
We didn't call any names.
That's right. Back in 1996, we were able to sing at the National Baptist Bible Fellowship meeting in Mesquite, Texas.
Yeah.
And well, there was a pastor that came by, and he said, I really got a blessing out of the singing. He said, here's my business card, here's my church card. He said, we would love to have y'all come. So I said, well, amen. So I gave it to Daddy. And so come to find out that this was a long way from Texas and Louisiana. But anyway, we were making a tour and we were going to be out that way. I told Daddy, I said, well, this pastor, he gave me his card and he invited us to come. I said, while we're out that way, I said, we need to call him and
Amen.
All that. So Daddy called the pastor and
I lined it up.
What kind of reception did he give you?
Oh, great. Man, he just said, wonderful.
Had he heard of us when you called him?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
He didn't know us.
And this church was fairly large.
Yeah,
It was
church.
a pretty good sized church.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we went out there and checked in our hotel, and the next morning, Sunday morning, we got up, got ready and everything, went to church, and it was Sunday school class time. We went into the Sunday school area, and the pastor walked up and introduced himself to us. And after he introduced himself and walked away, I leaned over to Dad. I said, "That's not him."
No, we didn't even know.
I said, "I've never seen that guy in my life." I said, "That's not the guy that asked us to come out here." And so we went out to eat after lunch. We sang, had a good service, went out to eat after lunch. And we laughed and laughed because what it was, this was the brother of the pastor that had asked us to come.
Yeah.
Well, they pastored 3,000 miles away from each other, but I had gotten confused. The last name was the same, so I got confused. So the pastor, I don't know if he thought we were lying or. Surely not, but he let us come.
He was gracious.
And he was very kind, but he had never seen us, and I'd never seen him. So that was strange.
Unusual.
But back in that same year, 1996, that same year, we used to go out to the Northwest every year and sing across the Northwest. And Daddy would he'd line up a service every night except Monday and Saturday. That was our nights off.
Yeah.
Monday and Saturday. But he'd line up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then 2 churches on Sunday. And so he lined up this trip, and we flew out there, and we got there on a Tuesday. We were to sing that night, and he called the pastor, and the pastor said, "Oh my goodness," said, "I forgot all about this. I completely forgot." Said, I haven't announced it, of course, because I forgot." He said, "We just can't have a service because I forgot." But he said, "I'll come by the hotel. I'll be by there pretty soon." So he came by the hotel, and he gave us a good love offering check.
Big offering.
And so we were, praise the Lord, and praise the Lord for the offering. But we were sad we didn't get to sing. But thank God for the offering. Well, the next night we were headed over to maybe an hour away or so to sing another service over there, and the pastor must have been Thursday night. And he said, we pulled up in the parking lot of the church, and the pastor happened to be walking around out there in the parking lot. We just happened to be there, and whenever we pulled up, he went like that. He said, "Oh my goodness," he said, "I forgot all about y'all coming." He said, "I completely forgot we can't have a service tonight, but here's a love offering check." And it was, once again, it was a good love. I said, told Dad, I said, "We're doing the wrong thing." I said, "We need to get people to pay us not to sing." We're in the wrong thing there,
I called my mom. I called her and I said, "Mom, I've been doing all this thing all wrong." I said, "Just call them and tell them to bring your offering to the motel."
Tell us that practical joke that Bill Grady pulled on us. The practical joke.
Boy, a big joke. I'm telling you.
Elaborate.
Elaborate. I mean, it included a lot of people. It cost them quite a bit. But we booked this church through Dr. Dallas Dobson out in Pasco, Washington. And it wasn't so far from there to be with this pastor. And but let's see, we had been with him one other time, I think.
Yes,
we've been with him one other time. So he knew us, and we were friends. And so we got to the was it motel? No, we just called him and said we were there. And he said, "Okay," he said, "I want you to follow me." And he said the boys, he put my boys with his boys, wasn't he?
At his house.
Yeah, at his house. Anyway, so we drove down and met him where he said to meet him, and it was a beautiful Coeur d'Alene Lake, just beautiful. I mean, the high-rise motel. A lot of your stars take their vacations there and everything. But anyway, we met there, and he had a man from his church had a boat there. And he said, "I want you and your wife, now you're going to enjoy this, you and your wife get in the boat with him, and we have a special place for you in a motel for you to spend the night and really enjoy your stay up here." So we got in the boat with this, he looked like from Hawaii or something. And so we went, and he came to a tunnel, a big tunnel. And kind of weird, but he took us through that tunnel, and I was wondering, what in the world? So he took us through that tunnel, and then we came out into an open area where there was a body of water, lake-like, and you could see a motel up on the horizon there that looked like it had been closed.
It had been closed.
I mean, it was bad looking. And
terrible.
So we pulled up, that guy pulled up on, and he said, "Get out right here." And there was a platform there. And my late wife, this is back when Jeannie was living, my late wife, and I got out, and they took us through. It was weird. First thing, these people, I don't know if they were Hawaiians or what, but they did a little dance for us there, like you would see in Hawaii. And then the guy twirls some swords, and they were on fire, and oh man,
He blew fire out of his mouth.
yeah, he blew fire out of his mouth, and then this guy comes screaming out of the woods over there and comes and dives into the water, and we're just standing there. We don't know what. I have a video, or I had a video. I think I still got it, of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy dives into the water like a pearl diver, and we're standing there watching, and all of a sudden he comes up out of the water, climbs up on the platform, and comes over to my wife and gives her some pearls.
Uh-huh.
He had pearl diver. He'd got them out, said, "This is a gift to you." Just to see our expressions was really something. And then they did something else. What was it?
They played the song Louie Louie on a big sound system.
Yeah.
And Bill Grady said we're fixing to prepare for dinner, and they brought out a little piglet, and then they took him off in the woods, and you heard a bunch of gunshots. And he said, they're killing our dinner in the woods there. We'll have it ready pretty soon.
Yeah. Boy, I mean, you should have seen my wife then.
Anyway, it was so elaborate, it'd take a long time to tell it, but it was bizarre.
Bill Grady's, and then he left there and went and he taught at Howes Anderson for some time.
One time we were, I was going through a real hard time. I was depressed and everything, going through a difficult time. This was 25 years ago, I guess. And we sang at this church, and they said, now we have a prophet's chamber, which, to be honest with you, when they say that, it makes us very nervous because there's no telling what those two words mean, really.
That's right.
So he said, we have a prophet's chamber. So we got there, and it was the Sunday school building, and they had put a couple of beds in Sunday school rooms, and the bathroom was down at the other end of the hall, and it was a gymnasium type bathroom with about 6 shower heads in it, tile walls, tile floor. And so I slept in one room, and Daddy and Sherry slept in another room. And the next morning we got up, and I got up and we wanted to take a shower, so I went into the shower room, and everything, to be honest with you, everything was dirty and everything was neglected. And I went in there and I turned the shower on, and I was standing naturally on the drain, or right at the drain. And when I turned that shower on and the water started going through that drain, there were roaches just started crawling out of that, coming out of that drain like that. Well, naturally, I backed away, and there was another shower head that had a hose hanging off of it. And I grabbed that and I turned it on, and I was shooting those roaches. Back in the drain.
That was quite an experience at that church. There was other things that we won't go into.
Back in 1982, we were singing in a church, and it was a Southern Baptist church, and we were to sing in the morning service. Then they had dinner on the grounds in the afternoon service. We got to we ate lunch. We went back in the auditorium. And of course, you know, when you have those type things, you're going to lose 70% of your crowd. You know, so we had probably 150 in the morning service, and then after they ate in the afternoon service, we had about 25. So anyway, they started the afternoon service, and they said, now we need to, first of all, say we're going to have the Drewetts come up, but first of all, we need to have a cemetery committee meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And so the moderator said, does anybody have anything to say? You know, the guy stood up and he said, well, we need to get a new weed eater for the cemetery. Said, that's too hard to keep that thing up, blah, blah, blah. And this other guy stood up and said, "We don't need to get another weed eater. We blah, 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 blah." Well, they got in a big argument. And the first guy said, "Well, I'll tell you one thing. If you don't get me a weed eater, I'm throwing those stones over the fence."
The foot stones.
The foot stones. I'm throwing those foot stones over the fence. The pastor said, "Now, wait a minute. So they got it calmed down, and they shut it out, and they said, "Now, Drewett, y'all come up and sing."
Hey, and about what was left, they got up and walked out.
We sang to about 5 people that were not in the mood to hear singing, let me tell you, after that. Oh, man. Tell that story about up in Florence, Kentucky with the bus.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a church up there, Brother Wayne Cox, dear friend, and supported us for years. I just love him and his people. Been a while since we've been up there. Still good friends, but we had sung there, and we was headed toward Louisville. Out of Louisville into Indiana to sing at a church. That was a Sunday morning with Brother Cox, and then we was going to sing down there. And we were going down the interstate. I believe that's 71.
Mm-hmm.
We was going down Interstate 71, and they had been working on that interstate. And I said, "Man, this is rough." I said, Jerry was with us, and I said, "Jerry, would you look out here and look down and see how bad the road is?" And he looked out and he said, "Well, it looks rough, but I don't know what's causing the." And about that time, unbelievable, about that time, I looked up and a big wheel passed us and went toward the other side, went across the median, and folks, it almost hit a Volkswagen. And if it would have killed whoever was in that Volkswagen. But it missed it, and it was going so fast and hard that it hit the other side, which was an incline, a high incline, and it went up over that, and it was going so fast, it jumped a pretty high fence and disappeared out there. But anyway, man, I mean, my bus started this, I mean, bad. And so I put on the brakes and started easing over, and I just got it off of the interstate just in time. The other wheel fell off, and our bus just laid down on it. Scared me, I mean, and I got out. Shawn was, how old were you then, son?
I was 17 maybe. Yeah.
But anyway, I got out and I saw that, and well, I didn't have a good attitude at that time, that bus. I said, "Oh no, man, what in the world?" And I remember Shawn said, "Well, Daddy, you always taught us Romans 8:28, you know." And I said, "Yeah, except when a wheel rolls off your bus." But I had to gumble myself down. And anyway, I told the boys, I said, "Listen, I'm going to have to hitchhike." We didn't have cell phones then. I said, "I'm going to have to hitchhike back and get some help." And I said, "You boys, go over there and get that wheel and bring it back over here." And so I did a hitchhike to town, or Florence, got a record, and came back. And boy, the boys, I mean, they were laying down. I mean, they
exhausted.
They were exhausted and hot and sweaty. And I said, what's the problem? Y'all get the wheel? They said, "Daddy," I said, that thing is heavy. Well, I had to go with them, and we had to get a tree, I think, that was laying there, and put it up over the fence, and push that thing over that and let it run down. It was an ordeal. But anyway, I want to say this: we all got in the record, and I forgot how. Anyway, we got back, took it to the garage, and I rented us a motel. Had to call the church and tell them we were not going to be able to be there that night, and I hated that. But anyway, I didn't even call Brother Wayne Cox that we were there, but he saw our bus the next day, and he called me and said, "Tommy, when you get your bus, just you go ahead. Don't worry about the bill." I said, "Oh no, brother, I'm not." And he said, "You let us be a blessing," and they paid, and it was very expensive.
Amen.
They paid for it. He's a friend.
Yeah. In 1994, we recorded every project that we recorded from '86 to 2008 was with with a engineer named Kevin McManus and a producer named Gary Prim. And so we about, I don't know how many projects with them, but anyway, in Nashville, in 1994 in Nashville, we had booked the studio, and we were recording. We were in the midst of a recording project. It was in January, and I'd never experienced cold like this in my life. It got down to 6 below zero actual temperature. That's not wind chill, it's actual temperature. But before it got down that low, it iced and snowed, and the whole city, the whole city of Nashville was just locked up. You could stand at our hotel we stayed in. Interstate 65 was right there, and you could stand there and you'd see a car about every few minutes. One car would pass on Interstate 65. That's how bad it was. But anyway, so we were in the midst of recording, but amazingly, the studio where we were at, which was Oak Valley Studio, did not lose its electricity, and we were still able to record. Amen. Even though it got down that cold. Well, while we were recording, Kevin McManus, the engineer, he got a phone call, and when he got off the phone, he was grinning, and so we said, "What's going on?" He said, "Garth Brooks' agent just called me. He said he can't find a studio to do an interview that he had scheduled with Garth Brooks, and he wanted to know if our studio was available." And I know it pained him to the nth degree for us to tell him, for us not to offer to give up our time, but we didn't give up our time. We had traveled 600 miles to get to Nashville, and we didn't give it up. So we finished our project, and I don't know where Garth Brooks ended up doing his interview.
I don't know if he was able to.
I don't know if but that was a interesting story. One time we were singing in Tyler, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
And we had checked into our hotel rooms, and it was late at night. I was fixing to go to sleep, and I heard something that sounded like an insect, a large insect on its back, and it's zzz, like that. That's what it sounded like to me. And I thought, what in the world? If I'm going to get some sleep, I'm going to have to get rid of that bug, whatever it is. So I started looking around my hotel room and all that, and I pulled the dresser drawer out of the dresser there in the hotel room, and I just threw myself back because there was a coiled snake.
Ready to strike.
When I opened that door, it went like that with his mouth wide open, and I backed way back, and then I stuck my foot out and shut the drawer back, and I called Daddy, and I said, "There's a snake in my room." So we called the front desk, and they called the animal control of Tyler, and here they came, and by the time they got there, it was at least 11:30, and they chased that snake around. They could not catch that. It took them forever because it was so elusive, and finally they chased it out of the hotel room, and it went out into the parking lot, and in the midst of all this happening, a police car had come to watch the fun, I guess. And the police car was there, and the policeman was there. And that thing crawled up into the motor of that police car, and they couldn't get it out. Nobody was going to stick their hand in there. No, they wouldn't even open the hood.
That's right.
They would not open the hood of the police car because if they stuck it in there, they might get bitten. So finally, they took the nightstick of the policeman and they beat around and all that, and that thing finally fell out on the ground, and then they caught it. It was very late by then. But in the midst of all that going on, well, Sherry was in the other room, my stepmother, and she was peeking out, trying to see what was going on, and she's deathly afraid of snakes.
Definitely.
Yeah. And she rubbed her leg up
on my pants. I had folded my pants there.
She rubbed her leg up against those pants, looking out the window, and she liked to die. But anyway,
I felt sorry for her. It scared her to death.
Even though they got the snake out, I changed hotel rooms, and I slept in another hotel room that night. So that was a fun. Tell about Brother Hall, Brother Howard Hall, Senior.
Some of you may know Dr. Howard Hall, a pastor of Shreveport Baptist Temple, and has pastored there for 40 plus years. And we sing for him, still sing for him often. And anyway, his dad, when I lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and was working out of a church up there, had worked for Dr. Westmoreland up there and was working out of the church. Well, Dr. Howard Hall's daddy was my best friend up there. And sometime he would go with me. And one of the first times he went with me to sing, this was when I was traveling by myself. I went to a church in Lexington, Tennessee, and that night I sang, give a mini concert, and then I closed with a testimony. And the Lord has used that at times to touch people, to get things right with God. And I would use my dad as an example of the time when I went to Dad, let him know how deeply I loved him and was so concerned about his relationship with God. And the Lord would use it. But I gave it that night, and Brother Howard Hall's daddy was Howard Senior. He was with me, and people were going to each other. They would go to each other and ask God to forgive them for maybe something they had done, tell them how much they loved them. And it was an unusual service, and so we got back to West Memphis where he lived, and Miss Hall was a precious lady. And he said, I'm going to start going with Tommy a lot. He said, I never had so many women come hug me and tell me how much they love me and everything. Naturally, She said, you ain't going with Tommy Drewett again.
Yeah. We, back in 1990, my mama had passed away in July of 1990, and Daddy and I kept going, just the two of us. And so we had he had scheduled to sing at a church in Magnolia, Arkansas, and so we got there that Sunday morning, and we went in that church, and we started loading our stuff in and setting up, and there was an older lady sitting in there already. She got there early. She said, "Oh, I'm so excited! Y'all going to sing this morning?" We said, "Oh yeah." I said we're going to sing there. Oh, amen. She was excited, and well, the pastor came in a few minutes, and he introduced himself. He's very, very nice, and he said, "Can I help you with something?" And we said, "Well, we're just looking forward to singing." And he said, "I'm sorry." He said, "Who are y'all?" And Daddy said, "Well, Tommy Drewett." And he said, "We don't have anybody scheduled as Tommy Drewett." And I don't even know, what was the church we were supposed to be at?
I can't think of the name of it, but I said, "Is this so and so?"
Is this Liberty Baptist Church? He said, "No, this is Calvary Baptist Church."
So
we had halfway set up. So we thought, oh my goodness, we looked at our watch, and we had to get that stuff down and load that and peel out to get to the correct
but
church.
We made it. That lady said, "Oh, let them stay and sing."
Yeah. Back in about the same year, 1990. Long story short, I'm trying to compress this, but we were singing in the Dallas area, and we all went out to eat after church. I was single at the time, naturally. I didn't get married till 2004. But we went to El Chico, Mexican restaurant, and I was sitting around some friends and everything. We were fellowshipping and everything, and after the service, and well, the waiter came up to me, and he leaned over and said, this man would like to talk to you. And I said, what do you mean, this man? He said, see that man sitting over there? He said, he wants to talk to you. And I looked over there. There was a guy wearing a suit with no tie, and he had a gold medallion around his neck, and he had, he was about mid-50s maybe, which is what I am now. But anyway, I just looked over there, and my friend that was sitting next to me, which is named Mark Smith, I said, Brother Mark, I said, you're the singles director at this church. You're on staff. You work at this church. I said, maybe since you're local, you'd like to, I wanted to get out of it. So I said, maybe you'd like to deal with it. So he said, okay. So he got up and he went over there, and he came back in a couple of minutes, said, no, he wants to talk to you. He wants to talk to you. I said, okay. So I got up and I went over there, and he was in a booth, and I sat across from him in the booth, and he said, my name is so-and-so. I don't remember what it was. He said, I just want to know something. He said, have you been baptized? And I said, well, yes. He said, I've been baptized. He said, how were you baptized? I said, well, by immersion. And he said, oh no. He said, I'm talking about, were you baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit? I said, yes. He said, that's wrong. He said, you're supposed to be baptized in the name of Jesus only. And I said, then how come it says that when Jesus was baptized, that the Holy Spirit descended like a dove, and the Father said, my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased? I said, the Trinity is represented in that picture right there.
Amen.
And he changed his subject real quick. He said, let me just say this. He said, if you don't circumcise your heart, then God's going to punish you. And I said, I don't think so. I said, there's no condemnation to those which are in Christ Jesus.
Amen.
And he just got up in a huff and walked off. Now, is that strange or what? I mean, that was really strange.
Let me tell them one about the bus in Annapolis.
Oh, yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
We were out east, and we used to love to go out there and East Coast, and we were wanting about to eat, so we got off the expressway in Annapolis, and oh boy, traffic! Whoo, it was heavy traffic there. And we got off and came to a traffic light behind some other cars, and all of a sudden, my vehicle, my bus, went dead, and I couldn't get it out of, I couldn't start it, couldn't get it out of gear, and I got out, went back there, and I'm not a mechanic. Well, cars were backing up. Well, this policeman came up. He said, sir, I'm going to have to call a record and get you out of here. He said, you're messing up the traffic bad in this city. And I said, oh, me. I said, I wished you wouldn't do that. I said, I tell you what, sir. I said, if you'll help my boys push this thing, I can get it out of gear, get it into gear and get it started. And then I said, after that, I know I can shift it without the clutch. And he did. He helped it because he wanted me out of the way. And the boys pushed, they got it started. And so I was shifting it without the clutch. And we were on our way. We was about 50 miles from where we were going to be singing in Chestertown, Maryland. And all of a sudden, I said, oh, mercy. We have toll booths that I don't know how many, 2 or 3 toll booths that we have got to stop. I said, oh, mercy. And I said, not only that, traffic lights. Oh, what am I going to do? I said, we really got to be up a creek. And so, with the traffic, with the traffic lights, I would drive slow if it was red. But if it wouldn't turn green for me, I would just turn right on it. And we'd make the block and come back and slowly till it turned green, then we'd go on through it. We had a lot of fun doing that as we go along. Well, then all of a sudden, there I look ahead, there is a toll booth. I said, oh boy. I said, I know what I'll do. I got the money out for the toll, and I said, Jerry, come here. I said, I'm going to use you boys. I said, take this money. I said, I'm going to slow down very slow when we get close to it, but you're going to have to get out and run, I mean run fast, pay the toll booth, and then jump on this thing as I go through. And that's what we did. Jerry would run out, pay it, jump back on the vehicle, and we'd keep going. And old Jerry said, let Shawn do it. I'm tired. Let him do it. So we did. And I remember Shawn said, what did I say? I said, you just tell him, said, you're paying for that bus coming yonder. And he slapped the money down. The lady said, what's that for? He said, for that bus coming yonder. And there was a policeman, a trooper, parked right over there at the side. I don't know why he didn't pull us over.
Yeah.
He was watching us. Anyway, when I went through there, old Shawn jumped on. And do you know what? We didn't have to stop again. We got to the church and pulled up to where we were going to park and plug in. And that church, they put a new clutch in for us and paid for it. God has taken care of us on the road.
We recorded, this next story we recorded in a live music recording, but I've never put it on video, not that that makes it better, but I'd kind of like to tell it at this time. It's the one where we were singing and at a small church that was just packed out. When the service was over with, the foyer was a little bitty foyer. You could hardly move in the foyer. And I was only about 17, 18 years old at this time. And this girl came up to me and she said, I enjoyed your singing so much. I said, well, I appreciate that. And she just kept staring at me and she said, I'd like to sing with y'all. And I said, well, my dad, he keeps it in the family. We've always kept it in the family and all that. And she said, well, I can take care of that. She said, I'm serious. I heard
it behind me.
And she said, well, I'd like to go out on a date sometime. And I said, well, I live a long way away from here. And I did. And so I said, man, I've got to get out of here. She had me pinned down, So she turned to talk to somebody, and I shot out that front door of that church. I went around to the side of the side of the church, and the bus was parked out there. And Jerry was on the bus, and I said, if I go on that bus and she goes to knocking on the bus, he'll tell her that I'm in the bus. So I said, I'm not going on the bus. So I passed the bus, and I went through the back door of the church, and they had a restroom that was just a single restroom. They had a men and a woman restroom. It's just that there was one toilet in it.
Yeah.
I went in there and shut the door, locked it, and people kept banging on that door. Anybody in there? I'm not done yet. Wait a minute. And I stayed in that restroom a long time. Those poor men trying to use the restroom, I guess. But finally, I could hear nothing but the pastor and Daddy talking. And anyway, I said, it's safe to come out now. And I opened that door, and she's out there, and she said, there you are! And she had waited all that time for me to come out of that restroom. And I just felt like throwing my hands up and saying, I surrender, But come to find out, she had some problems that she wasn't completely, I don't know how to say it, normal. She wasn't completely normal.
Let me say this. Today, the pastor that pastored that church called me, a dear friend, Brother Charles Beard. I wish I had time to tell you about him and Sandra, his wife. Precious, precious folks. I love them dearly. And we talked quite a while today, and I told him what we were doing with these recordings. He said, boy, I know one story you could use. And he brought that story up. And I said, oh, Shawn, I'll tell him about that girl, you know.
Yeah. Now, one of the I think funnier stories that happened was back in the mid '80s. We were singing at an anniversary service for a church, and a pretty good crowd there. And they had a dessert contest, and there's about 200 people, I guess, and they had a dessert contest. So the pastor chose myself and Jerry, my brother, to judge the desserts. So while he was preaching, he sent us to the fellowship hall to taste desserts. And so we went and we tasted desserts till we were about to throw up. If you've ever tasted that many, I mean, there's 50 of them at least. So we finally got to the point where we said, you know what, this is we think is just outstanding dessert. And so we wrote it on a piece of paper, and when he quit preaching and they had the invitation and all that, he said, all right, said we're going to have the prize for the best dessert. He said, Jerry and Shawn, they judged the desserts. And so we handed him the piece of paper. He said, Mrs. So-and-so, you won the prize. Well, she stood up. She was just as red as she could be. And he said, well, what's wrong? And she said, I bought that at Kroger. And I always said, don't ask people that live on restaurants to judge desserts, you know, that live on a bus. Don't ask them to judge desserts.
I just thought of what I wanted
Okay.
to. Shawn was pretty small at the time, and as we traveled on that bus, I said, now, fellas, we're going to have to be frugal. They call me tight, but I was being frugal. And I said, listen, when we stop and eat, I believe $3. Now, back then, you could get a pretty good meal.
This was in the 70s.
Yeah. I said, $3 be enough for you fellas. A little limit when you watch that menu. Okay. They were obedient, and so anyway, that's Brother Terry Samples was.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Terry Samples was pastoring in Nashville, and Beacon, I believe it was Beacon Baptist. But anyway, we sang for him back then, and he took us all out to eat, and so we were sitting down looking at our menus. Now it was Brother Terry and his family. You know, there were several of us there, and old Shawn said, "Hey, Daddy, can I get anything I want, or are you paying for it?" Boy, I mean, Brother Terry laughed, and he laughed, and he got up at the church. We had a good crowd, too. He got up, told the whole church about, can he get what he wants, or is he got to keep it to $3, you know?
This story just came to my mind. I didn't have it on. It's not a story, really. It's just a little funny thing. I sang in a church one time, where they sang their congregationals, and the organ could not hear the piano, and vice versa. And they did a whole hymn, all 3 or 4 verses. The organ was playing in a different key than the piano was, and it just about broke my spine. I mean, if you ever, I was sitting on the front row and that organ was playing the whole song in a different key than the piano was, but they just kept on around it. They couldn't hear anything, you know.
Oh, mercy.
Yeah, there's just so many things over the years, and there's stories too that are. Maybe we'll do another one, and we'll talk about. Maybe we'll do blessings, or we might do one we might do one that is, I mean, this is not all the funny stories, but maybe tragedies, or I don't know. We'll come up with another subject to do.
Yeah.
But let me mention before we sign off, I'm not a salesman, and anybody that knows me knows I'm not a salesman. But I've got this special going that you can get all these CDs for $20 off my website.
6 CDs.
Yeah, 6 of them. This is the one I made, one of my later CDs actually, and it's got all those songs. I don't have time to tell all the songs on it, but you got that one. You got the duet CD that Dad and Sherry did a few years ago. Then you got one of my other solo CDs, this one here. And then you have one of the favorites of the Drewetts here.
Two CDs.
Yeah, the 2 CDs in this package right there. Then you have this one, which covers most of the recordings that we did with Sherry, my stepmother. They're all in this 2 CD package right here. And then save the best for last.
Yeah.
This is the one that I put together of Daddy's. He recorded 3 solo albums, one in about 1965, one in 74, and one in 77. And I compiled them and I put them on this CD here. It's got the Ship Ahoy on it. It's got, Without the Blood, and a lot of the songs that were recorded when he was a young man. Look at that puffy dark hair right there. It took a long time to puff that up. But anyway, you can go on my website.
All of them for $20.
Yeah, you can go on my website, ShawnDrewettMinistries.org, and order that for $20 plus $3.50 shipping. I've got a large inventory of CDs, and I want to move them out. I want to get rid of these and move them out. So I'm letting them go for about $3. I think it's about $3.11 a CD is what it calculates out to. But I hope you've enjoyed some laughs, and we'll do something before too long again, and hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Why don't you lead us in prayer?
Okay. Dear Lord, thank you for the laughs, the fun times of traveling and singing. Thank you for the joy that you put in our hearts. Thank you for Daddy giving him good health, and that he can still laugh and have fun and everything. And we pray that this time of virus would be over very soon, and we could be back in the churches and meeting our friends and hearing the preaching in the house of God all together united. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.